So thank you everybody for joining us. We are starting our monthly guest webinar. Michael, the floor is yours. Unmute yourself, please.
My name is Michael Stahl, and
we all get that.
And I'm, as you can see on the background, I'm working for Intel, and I've been working for Intel for the last, believe it or not, 32 years. And some of them first 10 years in the fab, but the last 22 years I'm doing software testing. Mostly embedded stuff. So I did cable modems, I did Wi-Fi cards, smart TVs, 3D cameras, just to name a few. I also worked on software security and software security testing. And today I'm working in a kind of a startup inside Intel on a special project, which is really nice. And what I'll talk about today are situations where I've experienced, and I would assume that you experienced at least some of them, where we find a bug, and for whatever reason we don't report it. And I think that being aware of the fact that these things happen already improves the chances that we will report bugs. All the bugs that we encounter, but also I will give some ideas of how to encounter these bugs. So 10 reasons why testers do not report bugs and some ideas of how we can overcome this. And this is the whole list. You don't have to memorize it, no exam at the end. So let's start. The first type that I've experienced is that you run some test, or whether it's exploratory test or a scripted test, and the test fails, and you run it again because you want to get some details on the reproduction, and it doesn't reproduce, and it just disappeared. Possibly you had a reboot in the middle, or you reinstalled the new version, you rebuild the new version, whatever you did, the bug doesn't happen again. And you look at it and you say, look, I can't reproduce it. If I need to report it, it will take me time. If it doesn't reproduce, the developers will have nothing to do with it. What can they do with it? Sometimes I don't even have a proof that it happened. And even if I do, and I report, I give all the details, everything, eventually it will come back to the meeting where they need to decide which bug gets fixed and which one doesn't, and they see that I write it cannot be reproduced. So, okay, what can we do with it? Let's move on. So you do all this reasoning and you say, why even bother? I will not report this. And this is a problem. This is a problem because if you don't report these bugs, there is no evidence that they ever happened. So if another tester encountered this bug and they too cannot reproduce it, they don't know that somebody else has already seen it before. For them, it's the first time, right? So we lose the ability to start collecting this important information that says sometimes this bug appears. On the other hand, all the mechanisms that we have don't support this. I mean, as I just explained, if you report it in this way, nobody's going to deal with it. So the important part is to provide a mechanism in your bug reporting system that will allow to count how many times this bug appeared. And I'm under I'm talking under the assumption that people try, before they open bugs, they try to see if somebody else has already reported it. And then they say, oh, somebody else reported this as a non-reproducible. I'll just increment the counter. And then you start looking at, do we have reported non-reproducible bugs that the counter is already at 3 or 4 or 6, whatever number you want to use. And these are the ones that you need to start really investing time in finding. Because, yeah, I mean, sometimes we'll have a bug that doesn't reproduce, you can't do much about it. But if it repeats again and again, that's my view of the whole thing, that irreproducible bugs become highly reproducible after delivery to the customer. So you want to have some way of tracking these non-reproducible bugs. Second thing, and this is very much tied to the psychology of us as human beings. You see something, and something bothers you about it. It doesn't look right. But then you build some kind of a story. You tell yourself some kind of a fairy tale that explains away the whole thing and explains why this makes sense, why this strange behavior of the software makes sense. We had such a situation. I was working in a lab testing Wi-Fi cards, and the lab was full of Wi-Fi access points, Wi-Fi clients, so a lot of cards and a lot of messages going over the air in the lab. So we got a new build and we tried to run one of the tests, and the test failed. Okay, so we think what might happen. Okay, maybe there is too much RF noise, too much transmissions in the air. Let's try and isolate it and just have one Wi-Fi card and one access point and see if the problem returns. And we had these like chicken coop boxes or rooms that were RF isolated, like it's what is it called, the Faraday cage. You go inside and nothing from no RF from the outside comes in. You close the door, you run the test passes. You go outside, you run the test, it fails. Okay, so we explained it away. We said, okay, there are all this noise, all these, tens of access points, hundreds of Wi-Fi cards around. That's the reason. And the fact is, when we run it alone, just in the Faraday cage, no problem. And we started experiencing this problem again and again, the week after and the week after. At a certain point, somebody said, no, that doesn't make sense, and started to look into it. And eventually what we found out is that the software maintains a table of all the access points that the card can see. And the table could only hold 28 access points. We had more than 28 in the lab. So when that table got filled up, something broke and you couldn't run the test. But for 4 weeks, we carried that rather critical bug by explaining it away, telling ourselves a story. And it touches on those psychological psychological behaviors of cognitive dissonance. You see something that doesn't fit your beliefs, or what is called confirmation bias. You see how the software behaves, and it has a very strong power to convince you that, yeah, this is what it needs to do. And you tell yourself a story why this is right. So, and it's something that others have already also thought about. This is a quote from The Design of Everyday Things by Don Norman. Find an explanation and we are happy. Once we have an explanation, correct or incorrect, for otherwise discrepant or puzzling event, there is no more puzzle, no more discrepancy, we are happy, okay? As a result, we are complacent, at least for a while. So we need, as testers, we need to be aware of this. If something strange happens, we need to teach ourselves. The initial attitude should be, it's a bug. Now let's prove it's not a bug, and not the other way around of trying to explain away a strange situation. And all technology should be assumed guilty until proven innocent. Third situation. We run a test, the test fails, and then we run another test and it fails. And we say, oh, yeah, it's the same bug, right? Let's say, the previous test showed us that under certain circumstances, you cannot do a certain function. And now the other test is pretty much the same and only a little bit different maybe in the flow. And we say, well, it's the same root cause. If they fix this one, they fix the other one. What's the point of reporting it again? It's the same root cause. Now, which may very well be correct, right? But on the other hand, sometimes it's not correct. And sometimes it may be a result of something else, or a combination of the known problem and some other problem. So by thinking in this way and guessing that it's the same root cause, we may actually be missing something that needs to be fixed. Because our attitude should be, we don't report the root cause. We may have assumptions about root cause. I can write in the bug report, I think it's the same problem as the previous bug, but I should report symptoms. This is what I've seen. I've run this test, it runs a certain flow, and therefore I had one bug, and then I ran a different flow, and I got another bug. And I need to report it because the flow is not the same. The way I generated the bug is not the same. And possibly when they fix the first bug, they would fix it for a certain flow and they will not fix it for a different flow. So if only for the fact that we need to retest and see that both tests are now passing, we should report them both. And yes, we should educate both the developers. You will see situations where we will report something that you look like we're trying to inflate the numbers. But these are the reasons why we do it, and we will give you indication in the bug report. It looks like the other one, and maybe link them together or whatever. Never assume the obvious is true. Another problem is that we tend to give a very high importance to the written word. So we see something, we don't even like it, but it's in the requirement. That's how the requirements were written. So yeah, I guess that's how they wanted it to work. And we don't like to say, to start fighting with the developers or worse, with a senior architect who wrote the spec. Maybe in the past we tried and we were mocked, or as people told us, do your job and don't tell us what's the problem is, which in a way drives your testers to be narrow-mindedness, or in Hebrew we say small head. This is what you see in the letters that you may not be able to read. And that's an incorrect attitude. What we should do is to remind ourselves, whenever, at least for me, whenever I do a review of a document, I always find problem in the document. And I once did a calculation and some kind of statistics, and we found that on a regular product requirement document, after it goes through review, there are about 15 comments for each page. So the written word is not God's word. Right? It's not necessarily true. Many times there are mistakes in it. I also see on documents that I write them and I'm pretty happy with what I wrote. I give it to others for review and I get very nice comments and very correct comments. So nobody is perfect. There are mistakes. And we actually should, encourage testers to look at the specs and the requirements, with very critical mind. And if something doesn't look right to you, especially as you represent the user, try to look at it with user's eyes. Speak up and say that something is wrong. I want to give you an example. We had an installer. And usually the way you do it is you double click on the installer and you get all these screens on the way. And usually you would just select the default. So you just hit enter, 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 and you move through the screens pretty fast and everything gets installed. Nice. So they gave us the installer and I'm trying to install it and I'm hitting enter and nothing happens. So, I opened the bug and I was good about it, right? I went to see what Microsoft is saying, and I actually quoted from Microsoft, how the enter key should activate what is called the default button. So very nice, you quote the Bible, right, Microsoft? So the developer sends me another quote from Microsoft where he shows that no, the default button doesn't have to be the selected button. It can be a different button. Right, so they hooked the space bar to the control that was in focus, and the enter was linked to some other key. And then the question, of course, who is right? The fact that both of us could quote a written word doesn't mean much. There is the expectation of the user, and the user expects that as you go through install and then the next is in focus, you hit enter, it works. So we had arguments back and forth. Eventually, I managed to convince them, and they actually fixed. But going and trying to prove everything over because it's written isn't always correct. A fifth case is what is called stuckness, and this is coming from I don't know, this is from the I think in the 80s. This book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, or maybe it was the 70s, was very, very popular. It's a philosophical book, very hard to read. Personally, I tried to read it 3 times. I always got stuck somewhere toward the end. But it was very famous, and a whole generation of people read this. And he defined there's something which is called stuckness. What he called the mental stuckness that accompanies the physical stuckness of whatever you're working on. And I want to read to you a part or a piece from that book where he talks about this phenomenon. And think about it as I read this. This is something what he means by this, that you're trying to do something and then something is holding you back, is blocking you from doing what you are actually trying to do. A screw sticks, for example, on a side cover assembly. They're trying to open the engine to do some maintenance, and they need to open this cover. You check the manual to see if there might be any special cause for this screw to come off so hard, but all it says is remove side cover plate in that wonderful, terse, technical style that never tells you what you want to know. There is no earlier procedure left undone that might cause the cover screws to stick. If you're experienced, you would probably apply a penetrating liquid and an impact driver at this point. But suppose you are inexperienced and you attach a self-locking plier wrench, what we in Israel call a plier patent, to the shank of the screwdriver. So you attach this plier to the screwdriver and you really twist hard, a procedure that you have had success with in the past, but which this time succeeds only in tearing the slot of the screw. So ruining the screw you can't open. Your mind was already thinking ahead to what you would do when the cover plate was off. And so it takes a little time to realize that this irritating minor annoyance of a torn screw slot isn't just irritating and minor. You're stuck, stopped, terminated. It's absolutely stopping you from fixing the motorcycle. This isn't a rare scene in science or technology. This is the commonest scene of all, just plain stuck. In traditional maintenance, this is the worst of all moments. So bad that you have avoided even thinking about it before you come to it. This is the zero moment of consciousness. Stuck, no answer, honked, kaput. It's a miserable experience emotionally. You're losing time, you're incompetent. You don't know what you're doing. You should be ashamed of yourself. You should take the machine to a real mechanic, to a real tester, who knows how to figure these things out. It's normal at this point for the fear-anger syndrome to take over and make you want to hammer on the side plate with a chisel, to pound it off with a sledge if necessary. You think about it, and the more you think about it, the more you're inclined to take the whole machine to a high bridge and drop it off. It's just outrageous that a tiny little slot of a screw can defeat you so totally. So to translate this into our domain, let me show you an example. I had to reproduce a bug. This was the bug report. When you connect with an FTP client using Bluetooth, undo rename features does not work after renaming a folder. So the idea was you go and you see, so Bluetooth, you see folders and files, you go to a folder, you do a rename, and then you're supposed to be able to do undo. and that didn't work. So you could rename, but then if you tried to do undo, undo didn't work. So what is the test? Connect to the FTP server, rename a folder, do an undo. This is what I get after step 1. I get this. Bluetooth remote folder is busy. I do OK, I get this. I do OK, I get this. Okay, there is no Bluetooth connection. Now, my job is to try and do the, rename and undo. This is blocking me. I'm stuck. I can't do what I'm here to do, right? And this is tremendously frustrating, so frustrating that I'm not noticing that there is a much more critical bug right in front of my eyes, no Bluetooth connection, right? I'm not even thinking about this. I'm just frustrated. So what can we do in this situation? I think the reasonable thing is to try and divert the frustration. So if my initial task was, to connect to the FTP server, or in this example, install a software and do some tests, I can't install. Let's test the installer. Something is wrong. There is a bug here. Oh, okay. This will now I feel productive, right? Now I'm doing something productive. I'm not just trying to overcome some silly step. And this totally changes your mindset, and you're not frustrated anymore because you found a real bug. So failure is always an opportunity. Another thing that we've seen, and we've seen it, quite often, that you find 2 bugs, and the 2 bugs are related. Maybe they happen on the same window or on the same page, or through the same action, or something that I've seen a number of times when you have a bug in text and your application is being translated to 24 languages. So the bug appears 24 times now because the text was wrong and translated wrong. And so the theory says, no, don't report 2 bugs in the same report, right? But in fact, let's take the example of internationalization, where you need to translate something, I would now need to open 24 bugs, right? And it will take me much longer than to open a single bug that says, the word is wrong, and therefore all the translation has to be fixed. Much simpler. And also from developer side, they will look at it and say, what? This is 1 bug. Why did you open 24 bugs, right? So there is a pressure not to do it. It seems like redundant. It will take me too much time. I open both bugs, or 2 bugs or whatever in the same report. And of course, in some cases, they will fix only 1 and they will not fix the rest of it. Because this is the reason why we have this rule of don't report 2 bugs in 1 report, right? So how can we overcome this? First of all, there needs to be education that says, this is why we open more than 1 bug, even though it seems like it's you could have easily reported it in 1 report. Another thing is to save time for the testers, we need to have in the bug report system the ability to copy and edit. So we open the first bug with all the details, and then we can copy, and do the minor changes for the other bugs that appeared pretty much in the same place, and many times with most of the steps to reproduce being the same. And it's also a good idea to link all these bugs together, so you actually show the developers or the project management that, yeah, I know they are related. It's not like I'm trying to show you how smart I am and that I'm opening a lot of bugs. I know they are related. I'm opening them because otherwise there is a chance that we will forget to fix some of them. So that's, again, my view of this. Sometimes the whole is less than the sum of its part. Different situation. We are now in integration mode. So, especially this happens, it's very common in embedded software where the software has developed ahead of the hardware, and now the hardware appears, and this is the first time that we try to run the software on the hardware, and usually everybody is excited, and people are spending, days and nights in the laboratory trying to get it to work, and the tester developers are working very tightly together in the lab. I guess when you do a really agile development with testers and developers in the same group, this situation may also, a similar situation can happen. And you try a few things and you find a bug. And it's kind of an awkward situation because the first thing is, you sit next to the developer and, we are friends and we are trying and we are doing things and all of a sudden, oh, there's a problem. Okay, I'm going to squeal on you in the bug reporting system, right? And tell what you did wrong. That's sometimes it's not that comfortable. Also, it takes time. You're in a flow, you're trying to do something, and now you're stopping for 10 minutes to collect information and report a bug. It kind of doesn't fit in what we're trying to do. And the last thing is, in these situations, many times, the developer is working directly on the code, and as these bugs appear, immediately they fix them, we load again the version, and now it works. So what was the point of reporting a bug? We just wasted time. So what I think is that you need to be reasonable in these situations. And if something gets fixed on the spot, don't report it. Never mind, never happened. I mean, it's not like we report compilation errors, right? It gets fixed on the spot and we move on. So if it gets, if it's not staying in the code, not a problem. But if it's delayed for any reason, and that can be because we broke for lunch, because we had a meeting, or because, I had to leave, or the developer had to leave, and we'll only continue tomorrow, now there is a chance that we'll forget it. That's a good reason why to report it. And it's a good idea to discuss it ahead of time and arrive to some understanding with with development, how we are going to deal with bugs during integration. So we had a very big campaign in Israel about road accidents and reducing road traffic, and the slogan was, "Don't be right, be smart." And I think that this very much applied to this situation. Another thing, did that just happen? Okay. Sometimes you see something and it doesn't make sense, so you kind of ignore it. Relates also to what I mentioned in weaving a fairy tale. But also sometimes you see something that happened, it was a transient event. It happened once, it doesn't reproduce. You weren't really looking for it, so you're not even sure that you've seen it. And how do you report something like this? It says, I think I've seen something, and you have no way to prove that this happened. It's just something you think you've seen. Here is an example that I personally experienced. This was one of the screens during the installation of wireless software. So we get this screen, and then I got a new version of the code, and I'm installing it, and I see this. Okay, and I don't know if you can immediately find what the problem is, but if you see, do you want to connect to a Wi-Fi network? The K is not here, right? And you see that they changed the title. So yeah, it's possible that they, kind of forgot while they were typing, something went wrong, they did a typo and they missed two characters. I know I've seen it, but I was doing it while doing something else. I wasn't paying too much attention, but I've seen it and I couldn't reproduce it anymore, which was very strange. What do you do with something like that? You can't report it. It's like, what are you talking about? Are you silly? So never happened, but it did happen. I know it happened. So what do you do with this? So you need a proof, right? And as James Buck says, you can't look at everything at once, right? So you need some way of tracking what happened. And if you are in a situation where you feel that these things are happening, one of the solutions, and I've been using this for a long time, is to continuously record the screen. If you don't want to spend too much time on it, you don't want to spend money on any recorder. Actually, Windows 10 has a screen recorder built into the system. I don't know how much it loads the system, so I don't know how good it is. there are what is called activity monitoring software, which is basically software that was developed to spy on your employees and on your children and things like that. For a long time, I was using a software called Spector, which was sold to another company. I don't remember which one. Eventually, Intel IT said I can't use it because it's a spyware. It is a spyware, yes, that's what it is. But it was a software that would take a snapshot of my screen every second, and it hardly took any CPU. And it was really not loading the system at all. And there were interesting situations where we used, that software allowed us to, if something happened, maybe we would leave the machine running for the night and we come back in the morning and it's crashed. We could go back in time and see what actually happened, the seconds before it crashed. And for example, we once found a bug that only came up when the screensaver came up. And usually when we were running in the lab, we were actively engaged on the PC, so the screensaver would not come up. And but when we left the lab, after a while, it came up and crashed the system, and the recording could actually show us that this is what happened. So it's an interesting, interesting way of looking at things, and sometimes it's really helpful to install this type of software. And it's an idea that already in the Bible, you can see that the sight of the eyes is more meaningful than just what you think. What about usability? So, you can say it's not my job. There are human factor engineers, UX testers. It's their job to look at usability bugs. And since I'm testing functional, the functional behavior of the software, okay, so it's not so usable, but I have a simple workaround, or it's, so technically it's meeting the function that it's supposed to be. So not a bug. And sometimes we actually enjoy thinking like an engineer and the ability that, if we do this, we know how to get the software to work. Somebody told me, a program manager, she said, I was managing a project for the US Army. It was some communication device. And she said, I was doing it for a few months. And after a certain time, I said, hey, I want to see the product. I've not seen the product. So she goes down to the lab and she asks one of the engineers to show her, to give her a demonstration of the product. So he takes this, this machine from the rack, and he turns it on, turns it off, turns it on, and starts showing it to her. So, what was that? And he says, oh yeah, you have to do it twice, otherwise it doesn't work. And nobody felt that it's a problem, right? Because they were actually enjoying the fact that they know how to get it to work. And this is something that impacts us because we are engineers. When it gets to the user is not going to be, to do it so well. This is an example of a pop-up coming up during an install of one of the programs I worked on. So you install, and then you get the MUI warning pop-up. The OS language and the non-Unicode application language on your system differ. Oh my God, this is very scary. Do not show this warning again. I don't want to see the MUI warning again, right? The user has no idea what's going on here. So, we report that this is a bug. If you want the user to do something about it, tell the user what to do. If it doesn't really matter, don't show this pop-up. But don't show something like this. The user wouldn't know what to do with this. So bad usability is our job. We need to think in this way because we need to take into account the users don't have patience, especially if you think about mobile applications. I go to Google Play or to the Apple Store and I take something, and I'm downloading something, and if it doesn't work in like the first 10, 15 seconds, I'm uninstalling it and going to look for something else, right? I don't have any patience for this. So I will not going to spend time finding workarounds. I wouldn't even know how to go about finding workarounds. And I will think that it's not working. So Bad usability is a bug. Inconsistency is a bug. I'll show you in a minute another example. And what I found is that sometimes, you can argue with the developers and they'll tell you, but it's okay, it's working, etc. And you bring somebody from marketing and you show them this and they said, no, you have to fix it. And that's the end of the argument. So sometimes it's a matter of knowing who to enlist in an argument. Number 10, and this is where we get to, we are giving up because of we don't believe that something will get fixed. So, we are in a situation that we know that there are already a lot of open bugs, and I found a bug that is, from what I know about the application, it's very deep down in the design. If you want to fix it, you have to open everything, what we call here in Israel, too deep in the kit bag, right? Something that sits at the very bottom of your bag. And it will take me a lot of time to report it, and nobody's going to fix it because it's a low severity bug, because it's just a cosmetic bug or whatever. Inconsistent bug. Let me show you what I mean by inconsistency. And this is something I'm sure you've all seen. Did you ever think about it? If you want to add a line break in Office, so in Word you have to use Shift-Enter, in Excel you have to use Alt-Enter. Why? Why is it not the same? I don't know why it's not the same. It should have been the same, right? Because all Office is using the same. A lot of the shortcuts, a lot of the controls are working exactly the same. It's actually one of the benefits of using Office. But for some reason, this inconsistency exists. Maybe there is a good explanation for it, but I tried Alt-Enter in Word. It doesn't do anything. So it's not like it's already occupied doing some other thing. Could have also done, line break. Why not? So it is true that in this situation, a single report will not, nobody's going to look at a single report. But if you start collecting these and you end up with a lot of low severity bugs reported on an application, this is what is called death by 1,000 cuts, right? If an application has too many, this doesn't really work and that doesn't really work, and it doesn't exactly do it, in a clean fashion. Eventually, this is not a software that people would want to use. I know that for us, we have some release criteria for software, and one of the release criteria is how many bugs total are still open, right? And if there are too many open bugs, we are not releasing the software, because that's by 1,000 bugs, by 1,000 cuts. So you do need to report even the low bugs, because eventually they may add up. Another reason to report it is that maybe they will not fix it on this version, but maybe on the next version, they are going to do a major rewrite on that part of the software. They have a chance of fixing it. On the other hand, since it's, these type of bugs that we are pretty sure will not get fixed, at least not right away, then we need to think about how we reduce the time of reporting, how we make bug reporting something that really doesn't take a lot of time. One of the things that I've used in the past is some tool that collected a lot of information about the system without the tester having to go manually and look for it. So we would run some executable, it would collect all the drivers installed, all the versions of these drivers, and a lot of other stuff, pack them into a zip file that you could attach to the bug, and then you didn't have to go and think about, okay, I need to report that version, and where do I get the number, and all that stuff. So it made reporting much easier. I want to read something from a blog by Dave Weiner. To create a usable piece of software, you have to fight for every fix, every feature, every little accommodation that will get one more person up the curve. There are no shortcuts. It happens because you fought for every inch. This is how we get high quality software. So here are the 10 items or the 10 situations that I think cause testers not to report. And we have some more time, so I'm going to cover 2 more. One of them is the idea that I'll be back, right? I found a bug. I don't want to report now. I'm busy. I'm in the flow. I want to run some more tests. But then when I come back to report it, the system has already changed. I ran some other tests. Maybe I rebooted it. The symptom disappeared, or I forgot about it, or I got to a point where, sometimes passed and they're about to release a new version, and what am I going? It looks like it's irrelevant, or whatever other reason. So delaying bug reporting is one very, I think, common reason why eventually you don't report a bug. So there is no magic about it. You need to be back, right? And the best thing is to report right away. If you have to report it later for whatever reason, the least that you need to do is collect all that information that you will need. Okay, so maybe you will not format it nicely, and you will not spend time thinking about what exactly I'll write in the title, but at least collect the logs, collect screen images and all that stuff, so you can report later and write a good bug report. And it's a good rule to report all the bugs you've seen on the same day you've seen them, and not to delay it for the next day. I've made that decision more than once. I've broken that decision more than once. So, but it's a good goal to have. And the last one is a word of caution, right? We find a bug and it's very hard to reproduce, but we are not going to let it go away, and we are going to work on it, and we are going to find it. And after 3 days, we found the exact flow that will fix it. And we report it, and we suggest a severity of flow, which means probably it will not get, if it's so hard to reproduce and you have to go through, jump through hoops to get it to show, probably it will not get fixed. And probably we knew about it. We already could tell already on the first hour, this is not going to be fixed. So all these days, all the time and energy that we spent on hunting this bug, not necessarily, it wasn't really necessarily, worth it. So, in theory, you should report every bug, but in cases where it will take you so much time that you have an opportunity cost, right? How many other bugs you're not finding because you're now busy running after this low severity bug. So, you need to think about the fact that in theory is the same as practice, but in practice it isn't, at least not always. So apply common sense when you hunt bugs, even though the general rule should be, you found a bug, report it. So I encourage you to go and open some bugs, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Michael. And you do have the Q&A section down there. Feel free to leave your questions.
Thank you, Christian. No questions. Everything is totally clear. Okay, I think we'll would you mind going over stuckness again? How much of it do you want? The whole story or just the idea? I'll give you the idea. The idea is this: you're trying to do something, right? You want to test a certain part of your software, and to get there, you need to do some setup. Okay, when you need there are some prerequisites. Maybe you need to upload data to a database or whatever, and something doesn't work in the setup part. And the setup is not really what you're trying to do. The setup is just to bring you to the point where you can start testing. So the fact that you get stuck on the setup, it's very frustrating, right? And you feel like you're wasting your time and you're feeling worthless, and it's you just get angrier and angrier. And not always, but there are cases that the reason you can't do the setup is because there is a bug. And you kind of miss it because your mind is not on the setup. You want to run the test. And what I encourage you to do is to say, okay, why did I get stuck on the setup? There is a bug here, possibly, right? And then once you realize that the reason that the setup fails is that there is a bug, okay, this is great. Now I'm productive, right? I'm finding bugs. And it changes your mindset and you become more productive, and you will possibly find a very severe bug, because if you can't do the setup, then it's important to know. I hope that explains it more. I did not quite got the diversion. I don't understand the question. So Christian, if you give me more detail here. What's the best bug I've found? Lately I found the bug where when you do uninstall of a certain application, not mine, somebody else, it deletes everything in the folder that the uninstaller sits in. So that, for some reason, it's a long story, but for some reason that installer sat in a place where I had other folders, it just deleted everything. No restore, no nothing. And it took that company, I ran after them for a few weeks to convince them that they have a real problem, and they fixed it. It took them about half a year to fix it. But that was a good bug.
How did they fix it?
How did they fix it? I guess, usually installer is not supposed to delete everything that is in the folder. It needs to delete only the files that they put there. If I have my, my physics thesis in that folder, they're not supposed to delete it, right? They just had a bug of delete star. They're not supposed to do that. It's not a difficult bug to fix. How do I work? How do I deal with flakiness? As I mentioned, what I think is that you need to have the ability in your bug reporting system to count how many times people have seen this. This is one thing. And the other thing is to do some education with the developer that says, it's okay to report bugs that are flaky. You need to write in the report, this is not, it doesn't reproduce very often, or it reproduces once every 5 times. And to have the program management and the developers have the patience to understand it's okay to report something like that. We're not going to deal with it right now, but if it starts to happen more times, then we will deal with it. And it's okay. It will sit there open in the bug reporting system. Don't get excited over it. That's how we collect this information. How to react to developer that says that they can't reproduce and asking you to retest it. There is this, and there is another thing that you have a situation where they tell you, we fixed a lot of things. We need to check it again. Maybe it got fixed again. When they say they can't reproduce, you need to give the exact details. And if the exact details are there, sometimes they have a good reason to ask you to reproduce it, because maybe it's on a previous version and your lab is set up to easily bring up an earlier version, earlier piece of the hardware, and run the test. And for the developer, it will take a lot of time to set up the whole thing. And it actually makes sense for them to ask for your help. And sometimes it's, let's face it, it's laziness. And they're trying to, they have this hope of maybe it got away. There is I actually had a long thread on this on It's called Stack Overflow for QA. Maybe you can find it on Google. I don't have it available, readily available, that link, but there was a very interesting discussion because I asked this question and I was sure that people would just commiserate with me and we will have a nice chuckle about the lazy developers. And actually people gave, some good reasons why developers would ask us to do it, even though we think it's unreasonable. Okay, what else do we have here? How to encourage team members to report bugs? I think one of the things is that you can go over this presentation with them and tell, in some cases it's like giving the okay to report the things that we talked about. So, tell that they know that you support them. Oh, don't open two bugs in one report, and here are the reasons. Here is why you have to report integration bugs if you stop in the middle. And all these things, it's a lot of it is a matter of, especially junior testers who are afraid, am I doing right or not? They need to know that you have their back and you justify them opening a bug in this situation. We actually had, there is a metric that I'm commonly using to check how effective the test team is to see what percentage of our reports are being closed as not a bug, duplicate, or cannot reproduce. And you would think that you want to drive this towards zero. And actually, I think that when you see these numbers very low, like below 5%, that means your testers are afraid to open bugs, because they're afraid that something, they'll get bad reputation, or people will get on their case. You're just opening bugs and you're disturbing the peace. If you have too many of them, it's also a problem. My golden number is 15%. If the sum of these cannot reproduce, not a bug, and duplicate is about 15%, I'm saying, okay, you know what? It's kind of a good balance. People are not afraid to report and are not delaying a report until they're 100% sure that everything is right. And sometimes that would cause the I'll be back problem. They forget the details. So if you are at about 15%, I think you're good. If you're at a very low number, you should encourage your developers and your testers and give them support to, it's okay. If in some cases you open a bug that is duplicate or whatever, it happens, that's okay. What if a bug from production interferes with the newly developed functionality in there? Reporting these two bugs, how to prove? And production user does not have time. So you were saying that you find a bug in production that doesn't reproduce on the dev or on both? I don't understand. If you're maintaining a fix on production, okay, so you see the bug appearing both on the new development and on the production. Very much depends on how your organization deal with these situations, right? If something is in production, and then when you find a bug, you just fix that release and deploy, right? Then you have also to open on the dev. But if the way that you do that, your development processes are that if you fix something on the released branch, you also port that fix into the new development, then one should be fine, right? Because that's how your processes work. So you need to understand, if I open one and it gets fixed, would that be propagated into the other branch? So hopefully that makes sense. Did I miss anything?
I think we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
You all get a follow-up email with the recording, and thank you so much, Michael. was a pleasure.
You're welcome, my pleasure.
Thank you. And happy Shana Tova.
Yes, happy good, have a good year. Happy
Good
New
year.
Year. Hebrew year.
Bye, everybody.